Hi, I'm Claire, and I'm going to be taking the lectures on severe weather and bushfires in weeks 7 to 9 of Dangerous Earth. In August 2020, there has been a fascinating series of severe weather events off the New South Wales coast, associated with a particularly dramatic and dangerous type of weather system called an East Coast low. East Coast lows are responsible for most of the flooding rains and associated infrastructure damage and loss of life along the New South Wales coast. Recent East Coast lows have caused dramatic coastal erosion in coastal communities, extreme rainfall, damaging winds and dangerous surf conditions, with some locations seeing several hundreds of millimetres of rainfall over several days in late July and again in early August. This most recent series of East Coast low events has been particularly devastating because it has affected some of the very same regions that were hit by catastrophic bushfires this summer, when we saw record-breaking dangerous fire conditions over large regions of the country.
Hello, I'm Hennemai and I will give a lecture on floods in the coming week. And floods are only one of the major consequences of the severe weather events associated to this East Coast low. The floods have come in two major waves, also called flood pulses, and were recorded by the strong and rapid increase in river levels of up to 4.5 meters. One of the most affected catchments has been the Shoalhaven River, which is particularly important as it covers a third of Sydney's water supply. In some way, the floods were therefore a blessing after long-lasting drought conditions. However, all main dams in the area were overflowing with up to 3 meters over the spillway. This is pretty significant, and the volume of water lost this way over 24 hours equates to approximately 20 years of water usage in the Shoalhaven. Several aspects exacerbated the severity of the flooding in the Shoalhaven. Among others, the lack of plant ground cover after the disastrous fires earlier this year has amplified the amount of water directly running off the hill slopes and reaching the channels after the intense rains, and is additionally leading to soil erosion. Also, the Shoalhaven River flows through a steep and narrow gorge before entering the coastal plains, which leads to a so-called backup effect. This has caused the inundation of extensive areas of farmland in the low-lying floodplains, creating a wide range of severe problems. The backup effect is further amplified by both recent sea level rise and the very big swells in the ocean during the event.
Hi Dangerous Earth. My name is Sarah McSweeney and I'll be taking you for the Coastal Hazards lecture later in the semester. So in a coastal context, East Coast low storm events generate big waves moving onshore from the southeast. They impact really strongly on coastal regions on the eastern coast of Australia, so New South Wales right through to Brisbane and southern Queensland. So these areas have a long history of coastal erosion. And part of that is because houses are built right out onto the beachfront. There's a limited buffer zone or dune area to absorb the impacts of waves associated with storm events. You may have seen on the news recently that a very severe East Coast low hit the coast of New South Wales in July. You can see some of the images here on the bottom left-hand corner showing the extent of that erosion. That event was followed by a smaller storm event in August. And because those storms were back to back, the beach had little time to recover and the erosion was more severe. In future, the impacts of East Coast lows are going to become more severe. That's because we have factors like sea level rise, and we also have an increase in the magnitude and potentially the frequency of these storm events. Thank you and look forward to seeing you later in the semester.
Every year, between 50 and 60 volcanoes erupt around the world. At present, there are at least 6 volcanoes erupting in Italy, Japan, Mexico, and Indonesia. The mountain of Sinabung in Western Sumatra is presently erupting. The eruption is causing significant problems for the local people in the villages around Sinabung, including losses of up to 41.8 billion rupiah, equivalent to 4 million Australian dollars in a few days, by crop losses in the fields surrounding the mountain. This footage shot recently in Sinabung shows an eruption column that is sending ash around 5 kilometers into the air. And that ash is coming down and coating the streets around in the villages around the mountain, around the volcano. And that ash is getting into the waterways and contaminating the water supply. And the Indonesian authorities have been forced to provide fresh drinking water, trucked in fresh drinking water, to replace the contaminated water supplies. The people, you could see in the video, the people trying to wet down the ash on the streets outside their homes and their workplaces and their shops to prevent that ash getting remobilized and blown inside, where it causes quite significant health effects. So there's a lot of hazards associated with even this small or relatively modest eruption in Indonesia at the moment. Not least among which is the fact that this particular eruption is sending an eruptive column that is getting up to around 5,000 meters above sea level. And that's within the domain of air traffic. And so air traffic has to be carefully routed around a volcano that is displaying this kind of activity. So a lot of hazards to think about in association with volcano.